Right, listen back. So I shouldn't have. I'm very happy to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning, Rahel Bailie of Intentional Design. Rahel has come from the world of technical communication, but has now made her name in big, bold letters and flashing lights as an expert in content strategy. She's also the author or co-author of 2 books. One book she wrote with Nozorbina called Content Strategy, Connecting the Dots Between Business Brands and Benefits. And she's also co-authored with Scott Abel, The Language of Content Strategy, which was published earlier this year. With over 25 years of professional content experience, Rahel combines business communication and usability skills with a strong understanding of content and how to manage it. So this morning's presentation is Do You Trust Me Now? Content in the Age of Social Media. Thank you, Rahel.
Is my mic on? Oh, good. So this presentation, which is actually a little longer than 40 minutes, so I'm going to talk quickly rather than take out slides. I couldn't figure out which ones to take out. This presentation is about how we deal with content in the age of social media, where content converges and disperses, and we have these ever-increasing challenges to do more with content, to get the right people to engage with the right message at the right time and the right language, and so on and so forth. You know, I could go on, but you get the picture. As many of you may have gathered from the title of the presentation, the umbrella for what we're doing isn't really to create content. What we're doing is we're creating trust. And I borrowed the name of this presentation from the catchphrase of the Verizon ads, can you hear me now? And what happens is that this poor test guy goes out into these adverse conditions and tests the Verizon signal. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? And he tests it to see if, the signal works all over the place. And I thought it was a good symbol for this presentation because, like the Verizon tester, we can't send up a trial balloon and say, do you trust me now? And then walk away. We can't kind of, check done on a checklist and then move on. Because we're operating in an environment where things change all the time. And just like you see here, you can say, do you trust us now? Yes, okay, good. Next month when, we seem to have been giving your information to the NSA, do you trust us now? Might be a very different answer next month. But before we go too deep into the issue of trust, I'd like us to go on a little trip, a little bit of a diversion, if you will, to look at some of the factors that go into trust. So how many of you do this? You turn down the radio when you're doing something like backing into a parking space or looking for an address? How many? Yes. So a friend posted on Facebook, I thought I was the only one that did this. But in reality, we all do some form of it, especially as we get older. And why? Okay, well, it turns out that certain functions happen in the same part of the brain, and which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But that's why you can chew gum and drive, but texting and driving or talking on the phone and driving is another story. And that's why you can drive and listen to the radio, but you need to turn down the radio when you park. So personally, when I work, I can't have music on, but I can have a television in the background. Mind you, sometimes I see that I've been watching this channel for 2 hours because I take a mental break and I look up and but it turns out that the background noise and visuals does serve a purpose. It helped me focus. So we as humans are constantly taking in huge streams of data from each of our senses, and the brain doesn't have enough capacity to process it all. So researchers said that they found that there are some neurons in the prefrontal cortex that have the ability to suppress information that you're not interested in, and they're like filters. So we have this magical ability to focus on only the signals that we think are important, and what we think are important may be different what someone else thinks are important. But it's basically what we want to take in, and that makes sense. And in a time when there's an incredible amount of content being uploaded to the internet every single minute of every single day, focus can be a very good thing. So there are these things called synaptic connections. That's where the nerve cells meet. And they allow us to sharpen the precision of the signals and selectively boost the transmission of attention-grabbing information while reducing the level of noise or attention-disrupting information, which helps your attention shape your perception all through gamma waves. Oh, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Maybe I'm not going to sneeze. Okay. Excuse me. How many of you have seen the gorilla video? Yes? So we all shape our perception. Either we notice it or we don't notice it, depending on what we're focused on. So isn't it nice to know that there's some science behind why people ignore your content? Because when you're confronted with visual stimulation like this, I don't know if you've ever been in New York City in Times Square, but it is quite overwhelming when you're standing there and you're this high and there's all this stuff around you. You have to have a mechanism to filter out what you don't need so you can pay attention to what you do need. So here's another situation. I think this one is actually worse because it's harder to focus on and because you have to sort through each sign as you're driving and paying attention to the road. And it's not like you can just say, okay, I need this one. You have to read each one to find out if you need them. So does this sound familiar? Maybe it's like some communication that you may have developed yourself for your users. So, no, I hit the wrong way. Here we go. So it seems that information is carried on top of gamma waves, a little bit like music is carried on top of radio waves. These carrier waves transmit information from one region of the brain to another. And researchers have found that there are slow gamma waves and fast gamma waves coming from different brain areas, just like radio stations transmit on different frequencies. So brain cells can rapidly switch between these slow and fast waves, but they can't listen to both at the same time. So if you try to listen to both at the same time, it's like trying to listen to two radio stations by tuning in between, and all you hear is noise. So what they do is, one scientist said, it's kind of like this. You know how you feel when you connect with someone and you say you're on the same wavelength? Well, when brain cells want to connect with each other, they actually synchronize their activity. They either go fast or slow until they synchronize. So they're literally tuning into each other's wavelength. And until recently, no one really knew why the frequency of gamma waves differs so much from like one region of the brain to another and from one moment to the next. Or what this means for communication, but there's a theory and we call it the cocktail party effect. And by the way, these slides are on SlideShare. So you're welcome to take pictures, but it's also on SlideShare. So the cocktail party effect is how people's brains filter out background noises or background voices to concentrate on the person that they're trying to listen to at a cocktail party, which explains why if you're standing across the room and yelling out somebody's name over the top of chattering of other party guests, it's kind of futile. And it's not because they're tuning you out, but because they're really trying to tune that other person in, and by doing that, they're filtering out all this other noise. And I like that analogy of the cocktail party because it's a nice segue into another aspect of what we're discussing here. And that is that at the cocktail party, before you even get to the stage where you're filtering out extraneous noise, there's another stage where you're going to decide who you're even going to talk to. So you might walk in and you go, there's some work colleagues, so I kind of know what the conversation will be about. It's probably going to be about work. There are some personal friends over there. One of them just had a baby, so I kind of know what that's going to be. And I'm going to go over to the bar. Oh, there's my lovesick ex. I don't know how that conversation's going to go, but maybe not so well. So I'm just going to bypass it. And, oh, there's a friend of mine standing alone, and I'm just going to go and talk to them. So as you're doing this, you are making some sort of social judgment. And really what this is a moment of, do I trust you now, like right now? Do I trust you to have a decent conversation with me? Do I trust myself, my own social judgment, to determine the right conversation to focus on? And we can't put too much emphasis on this filtering and the different ways we use filtering to shape our reality, our social reality. So what do gamma waves and prefrontal cortex and focus and filtering and cocktail parties have to do with content and social media? Well, let's talk a little bit about social, let's talk a little bit about content, and then we'll loop it around to tie it all together. So right now, this is the audience participation program portion of our program. So what do you think of when you think of social content? Facebook? Yes? No? Just quick show of hands. Facebook? Yeah? Okay. Twitter? Okay, how many of you think Twitter for B2B and Facebook for B2C? A few less, okay. What about things like YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, Pinterest, Google Plus? You use some of those? Yes? So what other channels does your organization use? Anything I've not mentioned so far? LinkedIn? Just the web? Okay. Sorry? Wikipedia? Sorry? Oh, okay. So you might have campaigns with a social element. These are all good examples, by the way. I should add them in. What about older things like forums and listservs? You know, a lot of groups still use that. So are any of you using the older channels as well? A few of you? Okay, good. So it just goes to show that it's not just now with like Twitter and Facebook, but you know, we've gone back, we've always been social. We're just doing it more so. And here's why social matters, is that people are hardwired to interact with each other. We have what we call a social brain. So one social neuroscientist made an astute observation. She said, our brains are wired in a way that we experience reward during mutually satisfying social interactions, and we feel sensations similar to physical pain when we're socially rejected or disapproved. And that's whether it's online or in real life. So how you interact with your readers, customers, users online is just like you're telling them something while they're in the room. And that's one of the important things that we have to kind of consider. And you might say that's all well and good, but what does that have to do with my business? Because you're thinking, we deal with the public, you know, the channels we're using are working for us, or we're B2B and this has nothing to do with us, or our customers are engineers and developers. They don't care about social media. And what I want to do is challenge those assumptions, because they are assumptions, and they're probably assumptions that we've accumulated and refined over the years. And I believe that unless we're starting from a place where we're creating content that's meant for social validation, social interaction, social proof, we're not doing our jobs right. So the first thing I would really ask is your social content really social? And I've listed here some of the more common content genres and some of the channels into which we publish these genres. And so how many here would say that they're successfully doing multi-channel publishing? You're taking content and you're pushing it out to multiple channels, web, mobile, and so on. Okay, a couple of you. And how many would say that they're doing different genres of content for the different channels? No? Yes? Okay. And how many of you think that you're doing omni-channel publishing? So that's where you put the customer at the center, and then you ensure that the customers have the right content at the right time throughout the customer journey, and you can publish it from the kind of a single source. Okay, so we have a ways to go yet. And so if you're not doing that, then if I said, are you doing personalized content? Okay, one. Okay, so these are all things that we need to think about, because we have more and more demands to create better, more personalized, more relevant content in the right channel at the right time in the right place and so on. So what this means for your level of social engagement in the bigger picture is that the bigger picture actually isn't social media. In fact, there's a profound difference between doing social media and having a social business. So social media is only one aspect, if you will, of social business. So social media has often become just another output channel. You create posts and you post them. And sure, you can schedule them so that they fire off at regular intervals and so on, but what you're basically doing is creating another publishing channel with possibly some genre-specific content. So you say if we're putting it on Twitter, it has to be 140 characters, very terse, and it has a link. If we do it on Facebook, it's a little bit chattier. If we do it in a forum, it's maybe chattier. But that's basically it. And it's another publishing channel. So, hi. What's your name again? Peter. Peter, while you're here, are you staying at the conference hotel? Yeah? Have you been to the gym? They've got a great gym. You'd really like the gym. You should go down to the gym. Well, you're not a gym person? What about a pool person? You like the pool? They have a good pool. Have you been down to the pool? Oh, you'd like the pool. And they've got a great restaurant. Have you eaten at the restaurant? Oh, very cool. Okay. And they have a bar. A lot of geeks there this week, but, you'll like them. You'll like them. Been to the bar? Oh, and you like the bar? They didn't have your type of bourbon. Oh, well, That was a really nice conversation. We'll talk again tomorrow. So, since we had that little exchange, do you trust me anymore? No. Right answer. But this is what we do as brands. Hi, here's some information. Here's some more information. You've been on my site 5 seconds. Do you want to take a survey? Remember Marshall McLuhan, the communication way back in the day? And he had this thing about the call and response nature of the internet. And that's social. It's not just the call, I'm telling you some information. It's the response. It's the fact that I'm talking to you and you're nodding and you're kind of going like, okay, yeah, I get what you're saying, or you're answering me back. And so if you're not doing that, you're not really doing social. You're not evoking any kind of human response. And we have those social brains, and we have social engagement needs. And actually, they've shown that social engagement actually builds the volume of gray matter in the amygdala region of your brain. So what we do has the potential to build people's gray matter. I mean, stop to think about it. That's like a really powerful statement. So social business, as opposed to social media, is a state of mind, and it's an operational model. So social business is what happens in an organization that has matured and doesn't simply do social media, but actually has a social business strategy in place. So it's an organization where staff are empowered and enabled to represent your brand and that the organization has a framework in place to support that. So that means everyone in the business is expected to be a brand ambassador. Not just the shiny people in your communications department or PR department. It means that the salespeople on the shop floor, if that's your type of business, right through to the customer service reps doing post-sales support. And the content creators should be brand ambassadors too. And I can hear the internal dialogue from up here, like I'm too busy, I already have deliverables to get out the door, I don't know about this social stuff. But we all have to think about it, because these are very real pressures, I don't deny that. And I have a client whose perspective is, faster, faster, get stuff up the web faster because we have to make sales. And faster isn't working. And they may need to come around to the conclusion that we need to do it a little bit slower and a whole lot better. And so smart organizations are starting to change their performance metrics to meet that new reality, because instead of being measured on how fast can you get stuff up on the web, you have to measure how engaged are people with your content, or what's the quality of the content that you're putting up there. So this is a poster from Facebook, that never pausing innovation machine, and they've just adopted the mantra in their content strategy group of slow down and fix your shit. So this is a picture of their posters. So that's quite telling. So another assumption I'm going to challenge is about the success measures for our social initiatives. So social seems to be about liking and following. How many posts or pins or whatever the terminology can you get or get shared? How many likes did you get? There's an assumption that everything that you do, you want to share. But really, people aren't that one-dimensional. So we're all learning how to game the system, our readers included. So keeping up becomes a game in itself, which isn't particularly complimentary when it comes to engaging with a brand when you stop to think about it. And even if someone genuinely does like you, some likes want to be kept private, as do some purchases and some photos, as Jennifer Lawrence just found out recently. So someone may want to follow a cancer survivors group without telling the rest of the world, outside of the family. Or they might want to buy a bit of a naughty book without telling their social circle. Or they might want to job hunt in private. Or just keep some photo memories to themselves. So in other words, as a consumer, I want control over my content, and I'm redefining my content. The brand doesn't get to decide what's my content. I get to decide what my content is. So you may ask, do you trust me now? but the response might be surprising because it might be, I'm going to make my world of content work for me. And that brings us to content. Because without content, there is no social. Social is fueled by content. The social might be generated by different parties at different times, and it might take many forms, text, audio, video. I understand we're going to have a touch and smell soon, but it's all still content. So we create content to help shape an experience. In fact, instead of calling people users, every so often it goes around again about how we shouldn't call people users, we should recognize them as consumers of content as part of a conversation. So they're not just consumers of content, but why are they consuming it? Because they're part of this conversation. And we have an obligation to shift from last millennium's shotgun approach to marketing, and instead have the conversations that will prove to the people who want control over their content that we can be trusted with it. It goes back to 1999 and the Clue Train Manifesto. How many people here remember the Clue Train Manifesto? Wow. Yeah, I when I was putting this slide together, a young friend of mine was saying, what is that? And I said, it was published in 1999. And he said, I think I was born only a few years before that. And I went, oh, I'm so old. So this is all about, this was like radical at the time, about closing the loop to communicate and creating conversations. And so what too many companies do is they find a formula, and they follow the formula. And it's often not even their formula. So my favorite is the rise of the hackathon. So, the battle cry of every communications department now is, let's hold a hackathon. So I'm waiting for my hairdresser to have a hackathon, and everyone would come running out of the salon going don't touch my hair. So the main concern that we should have is whether our content's fit for purpose. Is it suitable for a particular audience? We saw how much content is uploaded to the web every day. So is the content we're providing what will engage our audience? What does that engagement promote? Does it promote trust in our brand? What should we be asking? Should we be asking, do you trust me now? And then there's the delivery content. And anybody who knows me knows that I always talk about the delivery of content, the technical side of content. But what it comes down to is that if you don't think about the content lifecycle and the customer lifecycle and the customer journey, and then tailor your strategy to fit them, and then you don't have an underlying infrastructure to deliver it, it's not going anywhere. You're going to have a big problem. And we know that some groups, and I won't name any names, but you know who you are, you would like to stay blissfully oblivious to these things. So let's talk about content delivery, but just kind of briefly. So the easiest one to start with is devices. So devices are becoming increasingly important in delivering and shaping content. There's a whole issue of what you deliver on what device and what it looks like, and that's being figured out through responsive design and adaptive content for the most part as part of a larger user experience. But then there's things like cross-device synchronization. So cloud-based services like Facebook are examples of pretty reliable synchronization, but take Skype, for instance. I find that a nightmare for me. People will ping me, and then they say, well, you weren't available, and it turns out that the message showed up on my iPad, but I'm opening it on the web, and it just didn't connect. So what we know now is that in 2014, in our era now, we don't trust software that doesn't do the things that we expect it to do, like synchronize, like show us the right content on the right device in an appropriate format. And even if we think of kind of benign apps like Evernote or OneNote, there's a sharing component, and they also have to figure out their social components. So sharing is only good when you can control how much is shared and with whom. We want good control over our content. We want reliable interfaces that we can trust. And if you've ever had a scare with auto backup to Google+, it does not inspire confidence. The next issue is platform. We have platform relevancy issues, or if I reframe that, we have platform neutrality issues. So the larger companies are busy creating walled gardens where you can't interconnect content, but the average consumer is just looking for more interoperability. So should it matter if you want to chat with someone, whether they have an iPhone, an Android phone, a Windows phone, or some other phone that's popular in another side of the world? You probably just want it to work. And let's not forget the current biggie, which is personalization. And I'll discuss this more in a few minutes, but do we have the delivery mechanism in place to make sure that your customers get the relevant messages from you? It won't inspire trust if you're asking users to upgrade products that they don't have, or you're giving them a sales pitch when really what they need is technical support. So what do you think their response would be to "do you trust me now" in the case where you blatantly show that you're not listening? And the new kid on the block, ephemeral content. Have any of you encountered this yet? Okay, this is all new, good new stuff. We should talk about text messaging a bit because it's becoming more and more important as a communication tool, and particularly on this side of the Atlantic, I'm finding. And I want to make perfectly clear, I am not advocating taking up texting as a tool to spam people with irrelevant marketing messages. But there is more communication being done by text. Alerts, for example. Since I've been in the UK, I love getting reminders from my dentist, my doctor, my bank to make my life easier. And it gives me confidence. It gives me confidence as brands that I engage with. And I've been reading more and more about text communication, communication through texting. So news is disseminated by text messages in countries where journalism is just too dangerous a business to be in. And I just read an article about connecting youth with news through text alerts. And in places like Africa, where virtually everyone has a mobile phone, kids are being helped with homework through texting. And then you have things like banking by phone. So in Africa, it's the backbone of the mobile money market. And in 2012, it topped $61 billion. And that's greater than the amount of money sent via mobile in Europe and North America combined. So text as a communication tool, it's not insignificant. So for some organizations, moving to transitory content makes sense. So Charlie Southwell, a social media guy whose expertise I value, explained to me that Snapchat, that app that got started for sexting, is now being used for ephemeral offers, which I'll talk about in a couple of minutes. But the market is very fragmented. So in China, you have WeChat, that has 500 million users. In Europe, Viber is still strong. And WhatsApp seems to be everywhere. There's a new one called Kik that seems to be everywhere. And it speaks to the move for kind of Wi-Fi-enabled chat so that you, or text so that you aren't using your bandwidth. And that shouldn't be ignored, whether it's Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp or Google Hangouts. We have to figure out who our audience is and if this is an appropriate way to interact with them. So texting as social content may become more relevant. So if you look at Betfair, it's a UK gambling site. Do people know it? Okay. It's kind of new to me. So they became a market leader, and they offer self-destructing odds via text. So it's not just very timely content. You have 3 minutes or whatever it is to take advantage of this, but it's also away from the prying eyes of their competitors. So the offer is shown for those few seconds that Snapchat allows, and then it's gone. And that's one approach for a very specific audience, and that audience has this urgency to take up on the offer. So we have to think of who's our audience, what do they need, how do we find a contemporary channel that works for them. So right now we think of Twitter as being relatively transitory because there's so much on Twitter that if a particular post hasn't been posted within the last few hours, you're likely to miss it. So that has its upsides and downsides. If you're a marketer, you're not very happy about that. But if you're the customer service person dealing with a nightmare of a problem, you're very happy when it falls off the radar. But what if that's not your demographic? What if you're part of the B2B community or in a more traditional field or in a regulated industry? What if you're an e-commerce site and the overwhelming majority of your content is product content? Well, netnographers are showing that there's plenty of opportunity to build social components into your content. And let's look at some examples of companies who are creating conversations with their content consumers in a way that have a real business impact. Autodesk. Are any of you here from Autodesk? Ah, there you go. They're building social into their technical documentation, and the whole goal is to provide a quick, efficient, and effortless experience, both for customer service and for pre-sales research. So they did a soft launch a while back, and they had such spontaneous engagement that they exceeded their objectives within a very short period of time. People where they had some gamification, a little bit of a gamification in there, and people would go in and talk about different ways they use the features, and they would correct errors, and they would enhance topics, and of course this is all kind of controlled in the back. You can't just edit it the way you edit Wikipedia, but it's showing how a very niche community in a B2B environment can add social in. Any of you know about the Naked Security blog? Sophos? Okay. It's more like, I think of it as more of a free of charge service because it's so helpful. And they have a very clear mission of exchanging advice and best practices to keep people safe from computer security issues. So do I trust them? You bet. I even follow them on Facebook because I find it so valuable. Bosch. Anyone here from Bosch? No? They did a presentation at CS Forum earlier this year where they looked at a few of their over 500 channels, and many of them have a social component. And the interesting part is for them, in many of their channels, they don't even mention Bosch products. What they're promoting is a state of mind and kind of the trust that goes with it. And also a corollary trust, the trust that they're not going to photobomb their products into your enjoyment of the content that they're providing. And then there are some companies that haven't implemented that well. Zappos, who's the American online shoe retailer, they used to be the darling of social media, but now it's had some serious backlash because they moved their hiring to a walled garden social network, and they exclusively hire for there. So to get a minimum wage job at Zappos, you have to be active in their version of Facebook, if you will. And how exhausting is that? Can you imagine if companies went to that and you had to, be active in 25 different communities all the time? It didn't go over well. So what does this mean for us? So the social aspects that we need to consider has grown exponentially. So depending on who our audience is, we may use very different social channels to reach them. And these are all examples of companies finding the right social building blocks that work for their audiences. And here's where theory meets practice in our professions. For a person to focus on what they need, they have to filter out all the noise factors, and they're going to do that based on their social needs. So let's go back a few years. First, readers filtered out banner ads, and we called that banner blindness. And so marketers used ads in the sidebar. They moved ads into the sidebar on the right-hand side of the page, and now readers have developed right rail blindness. And because, as part of our focus, we adopt a cognitive schema where a mental framework that helps us organize our expectations, it helps us take shortcuts. So we know not to look at the banner because it doesn't have information we want, so we just ignore it all the time, even if we should be paying attention. And now if you put useful information into the right rail, people ignore it because they're thinking it's ads, so they miss important information. So now we get down to brass tacks, the intersection of focus, social, and content, and that's trust. And for me, this is really at the heart of the matter, because if you have social and content and focus and all of that, it's nothing if you don't have trust. So we often talk about scent of information, the scent of a web page, if you will. So if the scent is strong, we trust our direction and we keep moving towards our destination. But when the scent is weak, we start to double back. And the same goes for trust. And I like to use the metaphor of a token. Each successful transaction with a brand means that you give them a trust token and you go on to the next task. And you give them another trust token and you go on to the next task. But one unsuccessful transaction could mean that you take back one or multiple or all of your trust tokens. And that can be devastating to a brand when there's a little disaster and you take back all your tokens, you never return. And just to keep things interesting, it turns out that there's more than one type of trust. So there's soft trust, which is about the brand itself. And then there's hard trust, which is the trust about the underlying technology. In other words, am I really going to put my credit card into this interface? And then there's trust for transient interactions and trust for long-term relationships. So we have to take into account the difference between rational or cognitive trust and then emotional trust. And this graphic actually is kind of a parallel journey that describes the trust journey. So the top arrow shows that in the early stages of trust, people look at things like how professionally is your site designed to determine whether they're going to even start to engage. And then later, they use a more detailed analysis to make trust decisions. And then the bottom arrow is showing you that at the same time, people are going through this journey where they have this intent to trust. Yeah, I think you look like you're not an axe murderer. Okay, And then they will engage in trust activities. Can you watch my bag while I go off to the ladies' room? And then there's the last stage of going into a trust relationship. So I want to look at a quick example of who I think of as the poster child for how to do content in the age of social. And it's the brand iFixit. So iFixit provides an entire product ecosystem and a social community, and they inspire trust all at the same time. And I think the key to their success is that they have a very clear vision. They call it the right to repair. And they put this right on their homepage, and the way they operate is within their self-imposed mandate. So they're a little bit about their history. Two budding entrepreneurs had originally assumed that if they put up an e-commerce site that sold parts to fix your phones, they'll build it and they shall come. And when that didn't happen, they changed their business model. And they built a site meant for sharing, both for contributors and content consumers. And in the process, they built in some social components for the benefit of all their customers. So through the site, the community provides instructions on how to fix things. And the site's up front about the fact that instructions are provided for free, and that the sales of the parts and tools to complete the repairs is what keeps the site solvent. So Kyle Wiens, one of the founders, describes their approach as advocacy-based marketing. And he said that an important distinction is that iFixit considers themselves as advocates of repair, not advocates of the company. The company is simply the delivery mechanism for the mandate. And it encourages people not just to fix things on the site, because that they believe repair is noble, which they say is part of their mission statement, but they also encourage people to contribute instructions. And they call this a collaborative repair community. So they do have some social checks and balances. People who contribute more useful instructions will end up making more money because they do pay a stipend, based on how relevant the instructions are. So it's other users who decide what's helpful and what's not. So it's the community who kind of polices itself. And they wanted the contributors to succeed, the people contributing instructions. So they created a content standard for when people contribute instructions to make it easier to submit and more consistent for users to use. So by moving to a social business model, they became wildly successful. And despite their audience, who you might see as one of these, like, I don't care about social media audience, their social component is critical to their success. And now other companies like the automotive sector are coming to them for help. So you can use something like social physics to analyze human behavior. You can use social engineering to develop a statistical model to predict and manipulate behavior. But if you look at recent social experiments, we can see that our efforts can cause ill will when the users of our services discover that we are experimenting with them and they feel manipulated, a little like rats in a lab. Facebook, its experiment recently with tweaking feeds to include more good news. Or OkCupid with its experiment with deliberately mismatching couples just to see what would happen. Or Zappos with its new hiring policy. So here's the thing. If we want our customers to trust us, we have to inspire trust. We have to think of all the touch points in our omnichannel strategy, in our design strategy, in our customer journey, right from discovery through to consideration to renewal and support. Because what we do in our professional lives as content professionals, as UX and usability professionals, as designers of interfaces or designers of content, has the potential to be seen as manipulators of behavior. We like to think of what we're doing as a noble service. We're the good guys. But our users may not always see it that way. So if we take the customer experience issue of the day, say personalization, we need to ask ourselves, it's the issue of the day to what end? To better user experience or more company profit? So as professionals, we always have to balance the tensions between those two sets of values. The values of the consumer, that may include things like respect of personal privacy or data security, particularly if there's financial information, and the values of the organization, which might be cheaper delivery service or extending the life of some old infrastructure that you want to use for another few years. I keep hitting the wrong button. So it's important that we examine all aspects of our customer experience to ask whether we've earned our users' trust. For example, are we presenting our content in professional and trustworthy ways? Does the website, or our delivery channel, mobile, work as anticipated? Is the content accurate and up-to-date and articulate and compelling? Does the content and design meet the expectations within the context that our content consumers are bringing? And do we exude competence in the context of the experience that they expect? So it's like going to a doctor. If the doctor is like fumbling and dropping things, do you want them giving you an injection? Right? So, we think about that as a trust component, and that's the way people are subconsciously thinking about us. So I think we need to ask ourselves, why should our content consumers trust us? And you notice I didn't say, why should they stop trusting us? The question is, why should they start trusting us? And if they don't trust us, why would we expect them to engage with our organization? So there is no magic formula, there's no procedural guide. Instead, what we have to do is create an ethos that makes itself known to our customers and other content consumers so that they can read us with as much transparency as we read our friends and family. As content and design professionals, we've always prided ourselves on wanting to do the right thing, and this is our opportunity to go out and do it. Thank you. Do we have time for any questions, or? Okay.
Thank you very much, Rahel. We really have only got time for one or two brief questions because the hotel staff have to reorganize the room in 1 minute. So do we have, I'm sure there are thousands of questions, and I'm sure Rahel's going to be here all day, and there's the closing panel as well. So is there anybody who just wants to ask a quick question now? Well, okay, there wasn't an immediate response. So let's say, please bring your questions to the desk and fill them in on the form for the closing panel. We're going to close this session now because the hotel has to reorganize. There is coffee upstairs, and look forward to the rest of the day. Many thanks to Rahel. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, good. Oh, thank you.